Hi, this is your Swapnil Bhartiya. We are here at LF Energy Summit in Paris. And today we have with us Boris Dolley, Director of Open Source Program Office and Sustainable IT at RTE. Boris, great to have you on the show.
Thank you so much, Abnil.
There is so much to talk about. First of all, thanks for hosting this event here at RTE. And of course, you folks played a very big role in the kind of the existence of LF Energy Project Foundation. So I would love to talk a bit about the origin story. How this foundation came to exist.
It will be a pleasure to try to answer. Yes. Let me just maybe first begin with the meeting with Shuli. It was the initial action who built all this journey. So I think a communication from Shuli, I think it was on LinkedIn. I wasn't the guy who answered to this message, but it was one of the member of the direction of RTE, because she sent a message like a bottle in the sea saying, we really would like to work on energy transition and climate change to try to make a better future, and thanks to the digitalization of the power systems. So we were professional of digitalization of the power system here in RTE. It's our main skill. So when we saw this message, we were thinking that, what about open source way? We knew few kinds of things around open source because we, like everyone, make a lot of downstream. We built our whole digital system, either if it's for corporate needs or for deep electrical things on our network. We often build it based on open source. But the question that Shuli was asking to us, it was not targeted to RT, but we saw this message. And when we saw this message, we were wondering, what if open source would be a way to accelerate what we need to accelerate here in RTE for our own needs, but for all the planet, all the people. And we had a meeting with her. I don't know exactly when it was, but I met her in 2018. It was in Paris. It was a meeting with our all vendors, our buyers, make each maybe 2 years a big meeting to share our roadmap with our vendors. It's calling Network Together. It's an event we organize. And at this event in 2018, I met Shuli. She came to us just because, thanks to this message. And she was invited to come and to speak with us about open source and what is the power of open source in our business. And she did it really well. And then after this meeting, we went to United States with a few fellows to learn what is open source. We made what we called in 2018 September, it was a study tour. So we went to the Linux Foundation area in California, and we learned a lot about what happens, for example, in telecommunication sector, thanks to the open source. What happens with that? So we learned a lot on how we can accelerate our transitions with an S, thanks to the open source. And when we came back in France with a lot of lesson learned, for example, if you have code, just share it, release early, often, fast. Manage the community, document the code, and you will see maybe you will have fellows to contribute, and everything will go really fast. And guess what? It happens. First, on one project, it was a European project, which is now how we are speaking in production. And all the TSOs of Europe are using this tool. now we are speaking. And we are speaking about something like 15 TSOs and 5 huge, which is RSC. It's a coordination between all these 15 TSOs. All these people are using an open source tools that we built it with a community. So it's not downstream this time, it's upstream. And it's another story when we do open source. You perfectly know that.
I was talking to a couple of folk who also received scholarship, where Pranav was there while I was talking. So can you also talk about how the community is kind of creating something virtually to not only remember her but also
I see what you mean. I really enjoy that these funds go to a scholarship, and I'm really pleased to know that the guy you met is this guy. I will go to see him and speak with him about what it inspired for him and for his future. I will go to see this guy and have a talk with him. It's yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So to answer this question, I think that the Shuli legacy is, I think, as huge as the light she spread on us when you were beginning a meeting with her for maybe 10 minutes or 13 minutes, but you spent 2 hours speaking with her. And I think her legacy will be something that we all remember for maybe a very long time. And it's a kind of a booster. You see what I mean? We owe to Shuli so much on this project. So each time we are facing difficulties, it's always very nice to remember that it was possible, and now it's obvious. We can go in this way, and it is a good way to go. So this is my point of view.
If you can, what was the anchor project? Because a lot of projects, when we look at LF Energy, these are, of course, it depends on project to project, but some projects are created, but some projects were already in production, and when they moved to LF Energy, they were production ready. They were mature projects. They were not, project.
Yes.
So talk about some of the major projects. Yeah.
Okay. We had a lot of interesting assets, software assets, which were in R&D development. So it was not in production. It was software to write the future of power system. And we have sometimes 10 years of R&D on a specific subject. And sometimes we have things that is still an idea, but not a software. So what happened at this time when we met Shuli, we were working on at least 2 big projects inside RTE for RTE needs. And it was about security analysis tools. And a lot of work has been done since maybe 5 years at this time. And we had a lot of line of code. And we were wondering at this time how we can put it in production in the near future. But at this time, we decided to put it in open source and to work not only RTE, but with other companies on this line of codes. And it was the first code around first network simulation and security analysis, and then coordination. We had a vision at this time, near 2016 maybe, or 17. What about the future of the coordination around the power system? We were used to have an electric power system who was a waterfall, nuclear power plant and end user consumers, and it goes this way. And coordination, we were used to do the coordination since something like, 1980. And near 2010, everything was completely different, and the flows of electricity will go up and will go through. So coordination will be a real challenge for us. And we had this project, which is Operator Fabric, which is a tool to be sure to send the good information to the good person at the good time. So we open source it in the LF Energy Foundation, and Alliander, a great partner from Netherlands, had exactly the same vision as us. So they decided to invest in this line of code, this open source project. So these two routes were the beginning of the journey.
As you're earlier talking about, the waterfall model, but now things have kind of changed. We have been having this discussion here also a lot that consumers are also becoming producers. We have solar panels, we have batteries, we have EVs. We are also generating and consuming electricity in a different way, which also means that, the players, they have to evolve, they have to change. But with open source and software-driven approach, I felt that it's easy or quick for you to respond quickly to the changing dynamics versus the old ways with proprietary technologies and all hardware-based solutions. So can you talk about how open source has enabled companies, not only like RTE, but other players also, to react quickly?
So open source is a great way to answer quickly to something, because we share the knowledge, we share the documentation, and sometimes we share data. And why is it something that able us to go really fast? It's because when you try to buy on the shelf product, you will always have a gap to cover 100% of your needs. And when you are trying to reinvent the wheel, you have to start from scratch and to write all alone what you need to write as code. Open source is a way where you benefit of everyone's work. And what you describe on the changing of the power system, waterfall to a multiple flow from everywhere, everyone has to face this if you have a good power system and an electrification of your country. So sharing the code and under the pressure of the speed of the change of everyone's needs of the electricity and production, local production, etc., you have to be quick. And open source, thanks to the sharing, allows you to be quick. Very quicker than if you have to start from scratch facing this challenge, or to buy something who's supposed to respond to all the needs you have. So this is the obvious way.
When we look at a company like RTE, of course, you folks play in a totally different domain. What value you see in putting your code base into open source?
We were speaking about the speed we have to react on what's happening on the electric power system. And open source is something you don't only consume. Open source exists if you produce open source. So if you are used to do downstream and you never are capable of thinking, am I losing value, secret value, or am I participating, and with public money concerning RTE, to something bigger than the value? Our value is to answer to our mission. It's not to make cash. It's not our model, so it's special. I'm speaking about public procurement here. So when you're a public company like us, what if you participate to the upstream effort and make the open source stronger? Because open source journey starts with free software, and then it became open source with business model. So if you have asset in computer science software and you share it, and it's one of the goals of the Linux Foundation, you make a business model possible upper the open source software. Someone come into the LF Energy Foundation, see everything exists in this foundation, and say, oh, this is my domain. why I can't either share code like you in upstream or offer services and you have to pay for that. So RTE was able to think that we can share our code and we can animate communities around this code. So that's why we jumped into the upstream open source way.
And you are director of open source program office at RTE. Can you talk about what is your day-to-day role?
It's directly connected to the previous question. We have to manage mainly two things. The first thing is, do we do open source in a good way? Which means, do we respect compliance? Are we carrying? Are we taking care of license compatibility in our code? We have to be careful around that. So this is one of the mission, is to review the compliance of code. And the second mission is to ask questions in the company, sometimes to a project leader, but sometimes to a director, to say, okay, this software is a game-changing software. What about publishing it in open source or keep it completely closed source? So one of the mission of the OSPO is to try to frequently ask this question on all the software we have. We have 3 layers. We have the layer of the hardware, and you have asset management in that, and we have code in that. And we are trying to think, can we contribute, as we did to the second layer, to upstream? So we have things in here, and we are reflecting. So it's my day-to-day job to see the director and the leader of the project to say, what if open source? And what if you will have an acceleration of your needs? Of the answers you need. And on the second layer, it's the system. You have to balance offer and demand. This was the first one where we did upstream. And there is a market layer. So we, across all these 3 layers, ask the question through the OSPO, what do we do? Stay close or let's go to open source?
You also have code base, which is out there. Your developers are also spending time. So how do you kind of either encourage or enable your developers so they can go out and contribute this code, which is open source?
I don't know if my answer is traditional, but it's an incentive for a developer to go open source. When we are trying to hire people, and we are saying that RTE build software concerning the energy and climate transition, and we're doing it through the open way. They're telling us, I'm your man. And internally speaking, for a developer, a good developer, when he was developing coding in RTE, he has his reputation. He's a good developer, very great work, etc. If you open source his code and his documentation, how will he be proud, or she, to publish the code and the documentation and to have someone say, wow, what is this? Tell me more about that. And then, you see what I mean? It makes a huge booster for our developer to contribute to open source. And if they want to change their employers, we don't want that, but they have their own reputation on GitHub. Not in our company. The future manager of one of our developers don't have to call me to say, hey, what do you think of this guy? No, he's seeing on GitHub what's happening. So I don't know if it's traditional answer, but we are really proud of that.
Since you folks are doing a lot of, open source, but you're not just about open source, can you talk about the Intel culture within the companies?
We change a thing in our hirement in RT. Because maybe 10 years ago, when we had to make software development, everything was made by external people. And we decided in 2017 to hire 100 developers in 5 years. So we did that. And we built the culture around open source because it's it was not scheduled, but it was synchronous with the open source journey. So the culture has born exactly at the same time as we take the opportunity and we decide to go to the open source way. So it's in our DNA somewhere. And when external people join us, because we don't develop alone, we lead the development with internal people, but we develop with external company, of course. But when the external people come to the company to develop, they are so proud to contribute to open source too. It's the same thing that I was speaking about concerning the hire of the guys. So it's in our culture, it's already in our DNA, and we think about something which is inner source. So taking all the advantage of open source culture in our company to put it in inner source, which means you already know that, but to have the same reflex. If we made closed source, we want open source this, but we have the same reflex to share, to ask questions, to be curious, to document, to test, to cyber assess the code, etc., etc., etc.
When we talk about open source, we are here in Europe. Actually, Europe, in a way, has been kind of because Linux kernel that also came from Europe. Sure. A lot of open source projects, I think a lot of grassroots open source is happening in Europe. What is unique about Europe, where at least at the grassroots level, we do see a lot of open source there?
We do naturally think about commons. And in commons, we have a lot of things, health, education, etc. But we do think also around IT, ICT. So open source is a natural way in Europe. And if we zoom in the public procurement, it will become something obvious, which means you have public money. Let's share what you do through open source. So it's more than routes, it's also actions, day-to-day actions to go faster thanks to the open source in Europe.
Can you also talk about the participation of the public sector with the private sector?
Oh, interesting. The public sector will produce easily open source. Now we are speaking with experience now and demonstration about the risk we take and the opportunity we have, which are really bigger than the risk. So now we can demonstrate this through the public procurement. And when we come to the private companies, they see the advantage also to build a business model upon the open source. And I think players like Red Hat and maybe Atlassian and DataStax for other technical components, they all demonstrate how open source business model is powerful. So private companies in Europe are able and ready to contribute to the open source, thinking, okay, I will produce code. It won't be secret. I won't have any license around that, but I will have, I think, a lot of money by installing and maintaining this kind of system based on open source. And there is another point, I think, is around cybersecurity. I think that it's impossible to answer the question, is cybersecurity better in open source or closed source? We have a lot of studies around that, but you have a bias if you are completely honest. I think that we demonstrate that in cybersecurity, we are through SBOM reflex, so software bill of materials, which is the reflex for open source, because you have to take care about licensing. So you do the SBOM. And when you have the SBOM, what is the effect on cybersecurity? It's better. So the open source way interests a lot private company because they become better as managing the cybersecurity of their client, because they have this legacy of the software bill of materials.
When we look at open source, and you were talking about the participation of private sector and also support the code, which also creating software, put it in open source, is not enough. There has to be a business model around it for the sustainability. Can you also talk about what do you mean by sustainable IT, especially from the point of view of open source?
What I can tell you about that is it's very natural to be sustainable through the open source. Why? We were speaking about the speed. We need to go fast because we have a power system changing and it's really fast. So when you go fast, you can either choose to go fast with stupid code, but in open source, we have some reflex. For example, KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. YAGNI, you ain't gonna need it. Dry, do not repeat yourself, etc. So when you have this kind of reflex, and when you make documentation, it's another reflex. And when you test, and when you make things modular, interoperable, when you do all this reflex, that in the DNA of open source community, you become sustainable. Because you will have an asset which can be durable. You will, in 10 years, and now 13 years, still be able to compile a kernel who was able to be what he is today. So we are speaking here about core sustainable IT, natural sustainable IT. It's perfectly compatible. Is it the best way to do this sustainable IT? And if we go to another topic, we have to speak about the energy consumption of the code. You can either easily scale in a cloud and you don't feel how energy you are consuming with your code. But if you go to the end user side and you take care of the time of responding and you care about the money you have to inject. So if you scale on the cloud and you inject a lot of money to answer quickly to your end users, you are going the wrong way because you don't earn so much money and you consume energy and you produce CO2. But if we go to the performance system, you make something which is documented, tested, cybersecurity assessed, and modular. What if you do a perfect code? I mean, each developer, and we go back to what we were seeing about the hiring process, either for our internal or external partner, private partner. When you say, please produce a good code, they are very interested by that. They don't want to copy-paste code and say, okay, I've done my job today. The client asked for this, and I produce that. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't work. I don't care. No, they have their own popularity on GitHub. What I did was modular, was tested, was documented, was performant. So it's sustainable by design. And I do love this combination between sustainable IT and open source.
What kind of future you envision when it comes to, not only just energy sector, but code, where we will not just be worrying about the gas guzzling car or EVs, but it will go beyond that?
I think that we can make performance in different ecosystem. You can code in Python, which is not the best one in the rating of the code for sustainable code, but you can do it really well in Python. You can do it really well in Java, and you will be the best in Rust or in C, or naturally. But I do believe that you can be sustainable in each kind of language if you care about how your code works inside the different module of the core of the software and with the other software through APIs, etc. I think it's not a question of language, or it's more a question of architecture, software architecture. If you eco-design your architecture at the beginning of what you are trying to do, I think you have all the chance to be, by design, sustainable.
Boris, thank you so much
Thank
for
you so
sitting
much.
down with me and talk about such a wide range of topics. I really appreciate that. And I would love to chat with you again.
Yes, it will be a pleasure.